Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out this evening. It's now 6 p.m. This is the Housing Information meeting for the Planning Board. And I'll just quickly introduce, we have a quorum. I'll introduce the members: Judith Kaplinger, Alan Punerton, Brian Lanoy, Tyler Hutchinson, myself, John Talbot, and our staff planner extraordinary, George Tavares. So we have a quorum. We can go ahead and begin. This is an informal meeting, so the only thing we probably need to vote on is at the end we have to vote to adjourn. So why are we here? The goal tonight is to provide you all information on what we're calling the housing land use article. If you're familiar with some of the stuff that's going on the last year and a half, the official name of the state is Affordable Housing something or other, LD 2003. That was passed back in 2022 and was supposed to take effect in July 1st of this year. And then the state realized that there was a lot of work that needed to be done and pushed off the implementation date to 1 July 2024. So the name is Affordable Housing on the state law. This is not what that's about. There's two parts to the state law. One that speaks specifically to affordable housing, the other that I would say speaks more to increasing density in places like Durham. So the affordable housing piece, when they talk about apartments and other things, does not apply for Durham. So put my glasses on, read my note. I covered all that stuff. So if those of you with a couple of faces look familiar, we started this process back in summer of 2022 in anticipation of that July 2023 deadline. We had a meeting like this October of last year in here to talk about what was going to be our plan or our recommendation for a land use article change to incorporate this. We got well into that, and then in January, February, the state sort of finally released their guidance on implementation, and we realized that despite having worked with the state up to that point, the track we were on wasn't gonna meet their rules. So this summer we started all over again, and have spent the summer and up until about now working on a new version of our implementation. And just in District Large, our town planner will give you a good description of that. But a couple of things that are important about it, as we were developing this last year to this year, a couple of things we took into consideration. One is the comprehensive plan that the town developed and approved, I believe, in 2018. So it's about 5 years old, and that's been a great guideline in how the town and the planning board, and we've looked at new articles and developing new ideas for the towns. We try to incorporate those ideas from the comp plan into what we're doing here. The other thing, obviously, we had to stay within the relatively strict guidelines from the state. There's not a lot of leeway here, but we did put a Durham spin, or have put a Durham spin on what we're doing here tonight. And the other thing we tried to do is to keep it simple, as simple as possible. The actual LD 2003 is very complicated, and the guidance that the Office of Economic and Community Development, the state office that provides guidance on those things, didn't help a lot. But Mr. Tavares and the planning board kind of worked through that stuff. So as we've developed this thing, Mr. Tavares has worked closely with that state organization that published the rules, Maine Municipal Association. So we've gotten outside opinions of whether what we're planning and what we're talking about will meet the state requirements. So where are we in the process? Tonight's meeting is all about giving you information on our proposal, and then so that you all are familiar with it in a broad sense, and you answer any questions you might have on it, take any comments you might have on it, and we'll take that back and take a look at what we're doing. We'll then write up and the next process would be to write up a more formal article. And I guess I should have started with the end state, which is if this goes forward, it will be approved or disapproved at the town meeting on the 6th of April. So our target date is is April 6th. In fact, it's probably late February to get it into the town report and so on and so forth. So over the next couple of months, we'll be finalizing this. There's another article out there on solar that Conservation Commission has been helping us with, and they'll be meeting similar to this here in the near future. Okay, so we'll put together that proposed article, send it to the select board. The select board will bless or tweak or whatever the final draft, the final proposal, send it back to us, the planning board. We will then hold a formal public hearing. So another meeting is a little more formal than tonight's is going to be, and that has to be no more than 30 days before April 6th and no less than 7 days before. So basically the end of March, there'll be a public hearing, a formal public hearing where everybody get a chance to comment, and then it will go for the town vote on the 6th of April. And I think that's probably about as much as I want to talk. What I'd like to do next is pass it off to Mr. Thabarge, who will go into our proposal and give you some detail. I know, I'm assuming everybody's here may have questions or comments that you want to do. I'd ask you to hold those until he's finished, and then we'll open the floor to questions. And then we'll kind of close it with questions and comments from the members of the planning board. So the only comment I've got is this is being filmed. It's not being live streamed, but it is being filmed. Kim, our IT specialist in the back, is using her own phone. So I would just ask that you speak loudly so that we can capture your comments on the video. And it will be shown on YouTube tomorrow, Kim, give or take sometime tomorrow morning, if you want to see and hear yourself talk. And so with that, I have never watched myself do that. So I'll hand it off to George.
Thank you, John. As you explained, the planning board has been working on this since April of 2022 when the law was passed. And so this is the culmination of a year and a half of work on this. And so what we're going to do is present pretty much everything that's on the handout. I'm just going to summarize it, and then we can get to your questions and comments on it. So, so the law itself requires for Durham's situation and towns like Durham, the new law says that on any vacant lot, you must allow 2 dwelling units. And they can either be a duplex, which Durham currently allows, or 2 standalone single family, which Durham does not currently allow. In Durham, they have to be attached, but under the new law, you will have to allow either standalone or attached. Maximum of 2 units are required by the law on a vacant lot, and you can have the current minimum lot size of 90,000 square feet.
Not required in that if you own a 2-acre lot, you don't have to put 2 houses on.
That's correct. Yeah, this is what the state law requires the town to allow. So the second part of the very complicated law that applies to Durham is to have a different treatment for developed lots. So if there is an existing single-family dwelling, as it's kind of depicted over here on the right, then you must allow 2 additional fully sized housing units, which can either be one attached, 1 detached, or 1 of each is the language that's in the law. So we're interpreting to say that if you have an existing single family, you can either add 1 separate unit, or you can add 1 attached and 1 separate. And that's what the law stipulates. In the case of a developed lot, the state is saying you must allow at least 3 fully sized dwelling units. And the only restrictions that you can put on it, beyond what you would require for a single family dwelling, is an increase in the lot size. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. In Durham's current ordinance, if you're doing a duplex, you have to have another extra ½ acre. So the minimum lot size jumps from a single family at 90,000 square feet with just over 2 acres to 110,000 square feet, which is just over 2.5 acres. So really, Durham's current regulations are in substantial compliance with the intent and with the requirements of the law. The state is saying, but you have to do more, and the more that you have to do is to allow that 3rd full-size unit, and allow the flexibility of having them be attached or detached. So in looking at these requirements, the planning board looked first at the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan has a section on housing policy, and the goals of that plan are to encourage and promote affordable, decent housing opportunities consistent with the other plans and goals of the plan. And to accomplish that goal, it contains both recommended housing policies and then recommended strategies for achieving those policies. So the first one is to maintain the current housing stock, and one way to do that, to get investment in the existing housing stock, is to allow accessory apartments for income purposes. And it requires, however, currently that they be attached to, within, or in an accessory building like a garage or a barn. And so this really recommends encouraging that option to continue. To allow a greater diversity of housing options, the plan points to the elimination of the Southwest Bend Growth District. This area that we're in right here, down to the Southwest Bend, down to the Newell Brook and Roseboro Road, and on either side of that, it used to allow 3 and 4 unit multifamily housing. With the repeal of the growth district, that was taken away, but the comprehensive plan continued to recommend that the town continue to consider allowing that anywhere in town in the rural residential district, but to make sure that they're compatible with the existing housing. So you see examples of this in other communities, and in Durham's instance, to allow an accessory apartment with a duplex. And if you have a big farmhouse, theoretically that could be broken up into 4 units and still look like the farmhouse from the standpoint of community character. The comprehensive plan also recognizes the increase in tiny homes, and the state law actually regulates that in addition to this new housing density. So it recommends implementing those requirements. And then finally, to support efforts to develop workforce housing, it suggests adjusting the requirement for a duplex. Why do you have to have 2.5 acres versus 2 acres? And unless there's some objective reason, then it seems to make sense to just have it be a straight 2-acre minimum lot size. So that's been in the comprehensive plan. It was adopted in April of 2019, and so that is kind of the framework for all land use policies that the town might pursue. So in addition to looking at the comprehensive plan recommendations, as John indicated, the planning board also did a public participation process that included a citizen survey, and there were 4 questions, just general, what are your concerns? 2 of which were, are you concerned about children, they say graduating from school, not being able to find housing in the community. On the flip side, if you have retired parents that you want to come help with your school children, then are you concerned that they won't be able to find housing? And then on the flip side, for people that have other concerns, such as towns growing too fast, increased taxes, those are things we hear all the time. And then finally, the town's rural character is something that's called for in the comprehensive plan, and how are you concerned about how that's changing with the housing development. So the bar chart down below pretty much catalogs that there was, people are more concerned than not about the lack of housing opportunities for family members, but they're even more concerned about the potential impacts of housing on services and the town's character. So as a follow-up, then the question becomes, okay, how do you address those concerns? And so a 5th question was added to this very short, simple survey that said, okay, in the town's approach to responding to this new state requirement, do you think option 1, the town should be less restrictive to encourage the housing options, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, be more restrictive to limit growth? Which of those, based on your concerns, is what you would recommend that the planning board pursue? And pretty much, you know, if you lump the neutral and less restrictive together versus the more restrictive, it's a pretty even split within the community in terms of how people do. About 216 people responded to this survey, and that little capshot of public opinion seemed to be pretty divided. So from that, the planning board then, as you guys deliberated it and gave me direction, you wanted to really take an approach that tried to address both the concerns for housing availability and the concerns for impacts on the community. So the way that was pursued, there we go. So, one track of the response, and there were two. The first one is to follow the comprehensive plan. And so that would say allow more accessory apartments, but make sure that they fit into the character of the neighborhood and the community. And the way that that is currently accomplished and would be continued with the additional allowance of a second accessory apartment is that they would have, could be no more than 50% of the floor area of the main dwelling unit. And you'd have a maximum of 3 housing units, which is the state new standard. And by having those smaller units fit into the existing structures, then you can hopefully address some of the issue of compatibility with existing neighborhoods, while at the same time providing more opportunity for housing options. So that's the first part of the planning board proposal. And then the second part is to follow the state law. This would not be enough to satisfy the state law, because the state law says you have to allow in any developed lot 2 additional full-size housing units. You can't restrict the size of them according to the state mandate. So the second half of this would say, as allowed by the law to address the housing impacts, if they are going to put in a duplex and a separate single-family dwelling on the same lot, this would apply a 2-acre lot area per each of those dwelling units. So to build a duplex and a single-family standalone on the same lot, you would need a total of 6 acres. So that basically is the proposal that the planning board is currently considering to put before the select board for presentation at the April 2024 town meeting. If that passes, the town, according to MMA's legal, as well as the Department of Economic Community Development, this concept would meet the state law. We obviously have to look at the detailed language that does it. And so finally, if that does not pass at town meeting, then the new state law will go into effect on July 1st of next year, and that will allow 2 standalone single families on 2 acres, and it will allow a duplex and a standalone on 2.5 acres, which is the lot size that is currently in the ordinance. So that's basically the proposal, and Sean, you want to take it back to field any questions?
I will do that. I just to add a little bit to what George said. I think it's important to note that whatever is done, you can't just cram more houses on a lot. You still, septic has to pass, still have to have the setbacks from your neighbors. There are things that the state has said you can't restrict. First, you can't add additional parking requirements. But it's not, somebody just can't come in and start plopping houses on it. They still have to fit, for lack of a better term. Okay, so we'll hand it off to you all now. A couple of simple rules. Please speak loud enough so that Kim can pick you up in the background there. And just be polite to everybody. It's not been a problem in a couple of years in Durham. We're all a bunch of polite folks. And then please just don't beat a dead horse, but feel free to ask questions. We don't have a lot of people, so if you ask a question, you think of one that want to build on what somebody else asked, we'll give you another shot at it. So with that, I will now open it to questions. Gentlemen in the tan sweatshirt.
My name is Nathan Ledger. I live here in town, and I have so many questions. But first of all, I keep taking offense to the fact that when I keep hearing that this is confusing. The governor signed this LD 2003 into law 2 years ago. And I gotta tell you that there's builders and investors that are not confused. The confusion came when the government got involved and started putting I'm gonna quote the chairman, a Durham spin on it. When we started spinning things around and adding things, that's when it became confusing. This proposal of increasing lot sizes was never proposed at the last public hearing meeting, because I went to it and I watched every single planning board meeting. Furthermore, the planning board has never put together a proposal in a public meeting that I've been able to witness on YouTube. I've never been able to watch you guys deliberate or come up with this proposal. This proposal was handed to you by a town employee, and you went with it. I can keep going. Failure to pass the planning board proposal in red, you're now swaying the voter. You're now telling the voter, who may have no idea, and by the way, you quoted a survey that only 216 people took part of. On the 2020 census, there was 4,173 residents of Durham. That's 5%. 5% of the people answered your survey, and you took that and ran with it. And then now you put on this paper, in red, by the way, which the FBI has done studies, plenty of studies, that communication is sometimes 70% nonverbal. You don't really need to say anything to get your point across. And so when you pass this out to the other 95% of the residents of Durham and say that there's going to be a failure, and in red, that if you don't pass what the planning board has proposed, there's going to be a big red failure, you're swaying the voter. And that I take offense to, because I'm very, very conservative and I believe in democracy. You're swaying the voter. You're telling them that this down here is really, really bad. What the governor signed into law 2 years ago and implemented, and it took 2 years for the local governments to come on board with it, is bad. Why is all of this in red and all of this is regular letters? So somebody who has no idea what we're talking about, they're immediately going to look at this and go, oh, option 1, I must vote for it. So I take offense to that. This was never proposed, this whole new increased lot sizes was never proposed last year. It keeps getting changed as we keep going and kicking the can down the road further and further and further. And I don't understand it. I'll have many more questions, but I gotta take a deep breath and let everybody else time.
Okay, is anybody moving on?
Go ahead, Heather.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things that he said. My name's Heather Roy. I live at 777 Hollowell Road. I do remember being at a planning board meeting where the lot increase was discussed, and I think it was brought up by Ann, in fact. So I just want to put that out there, that I actually attended a meeting where that was discussed at a planning board meeting. And second, in the past, we have also had conversations around language, neutral language, so I appreciate that comment. I would like to say that 210 people responding to the survey is very close to the amount of people that we have at town meeting, which are the people who will vote on this. And so while there are a lot more registered voters, that survey captured about the same number of people that show up to vote. And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Carnes, and I live at 635 Pinkenbrook Road. And my question is about the option on the right. It's all a little Greek to me. I'm just curious. It essentially is kind of saying you need 6 acres to have 3 dwellings. Currently, it's 2 acres for a dwelling-ish. I'm simplifying it more than it needs to be, but really you're now saying it needs to be 6 acres for 3 dwellings. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And it surprises me that in the nature of the law, not wanting to make it such an increased lot size for dwellings. I'm just curious why that option is out there. I guess it is to preserve the quality, maybe, and of life, as the respondents indicated. But I was just curious, why is it 6 acres? Why isn't it 5 acres, or why isn't it maybe 4.5 acres? I was just wondering where that came from.
I think it came, and George and everybody else can correct me, if single family now is 2 acres, and another single family, another dwelling is 2 acres, and another dwelling makes it 6 acres, I mean 2, 4, 6.
Right. Right, and but again, I think the intent of the law is to make it
Thank
so more people could access housing
You're making
without
us
the
buy a
need.
bigger piece of property to
You,
do the.
Yeah,
she's speaking now, you'll get to turn again.
so I guess I was just concerned that, that all of a sudden it's really, there's improvements and there's gonna be more accessibility for additional housing if someone wants to live over a garage or if someone has, maybe an in-law apartment. But for, purposes of a full-size dwelling, not many people can afford 6 acres in town if they wanted to have a family compound, let's say, or something. So I was just curious why it had to be that large.
Just to clarify, where the number 6 acres came from is that under the state law, you can increase the lot size for each unit. You cannot make it more than the base lot size for a single-family dwelling. So in Durham, it's 2 acres. You could require 2 acres for each of those units.
Gotcha.
So that is the maximum that the town could require under the law. It doesn't say that you could not require less. But that's why it's came out at 6 acres. That's the maximum that the town could require.
Did you have any more?
No, thank you.
Ms. Birdie?
Wait, yeah, I'm Paula Purdy, down here in Hollowell. I guess that's to clarify that we're trying to keep the rural character of Durham, so having 6 acres, in my opinion, helps to keep that rural character.
And George, actually, you wanna go back to the survey results? There was a pretty good graphic on the bottom.
That one or one just
No,
before that?
yeah, both of them really, but.
Okay.
Yeah, so the bottom 2 questions here, where you can see people are more concerned, the dark blue versus not. Bottom question, are you concerned that new housing is changing the character of Durham from rural to suburban? And then the question above that is, gone too fast, so both of those, I think, reflect that increase in acres.
I just wanted to follow up on that also. It's my understanding that part of the reason why this was discussed is not only to preserve the rural character, but also because of the impacts to our services that we can provide. And if there's no further restrictions put on this, like the impact to the school, the impact to the municipal services that are provided, without a little bit more restriction, which follows what this data is saying, the majority of people, see how much more dark blue there is on those 2 questions versus the top 2 questions, right? Is that I think that is encompassing like a holistic view and not just looking at just the ability to increase housing, but what the implications are of increased housing on the town as a whole.
So the 2 things, I'm sorry, I respect everybody's opinion about this survey, but the survey means nothing to me. 5% of the people answered the survey. If you're going off a survey, you can't just, the number is fine if that's how many people vote and that's how many people took the survey. But the people who show up, you have no idea, you don't have a crystal ball who shows up to vote. These numbers are just like arbitrary to me. Whoever signed up and went on the computer, if you want me to tomorrow, I'll make sure that every single one of my neighbors and every single person I know in Durham gets onto a survey, and I can manipulate this survey. I can go around and do grassroots knocking on doors and make people do a survey on my phone, and I'll change these numbers for you tomorrow if you'd like me to. I got nothing to do besides my 3 children. But I don't want to hear about the survey because 205% of the Durham residents voted on it. That's why we have votes. That's why we have the election.
I think that's a very good point.
Here's my question though. LD 2003 was implemented why? Because we have a housing crisis in Maine. People need places to live. There's nothing on the market, and the cost of borrowing money for first-time home buyers is through the roof. So what you're basically saying to somebody who already has a 2.5 acre lot is too bad. You can't do what the new law is trying to fix, because Durham doesn't want to be a part of the solution. Durham wants to restrict these accessory dwelling units. We don't want to add more houses to our properties. We want to continue the problem of the housing crisis that we have here in Maine, which is why LD, if you look at the authors of LD 2003, the reason it was implemented was because we have a housing crisis in Maine. People need places to live. And when you go to the 6-acre lot, you're basically telling people that already own property, you're out. You can't do anything here because we're gonna increase the lot size. And so you're alienating every homeowner. They can't do anything about it. And the reason I'm frustrated is, and I like this answer, I was already told that I could do something on my 3-acre lot. And now this is coming out 2 years after.
But okay.
Yeah, that's a whole new ball of wax that we don't need to get into in a public forum. But I was already told something, and I was dragged down the line for an entire year, being told to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait until what? The town of Durham gets their act together? This was passed and signed by the governor 2 years ago.
Okay. Ms. Roy.
I have questions about specifics.
Okay, we'll get to those. Kim, did you want to ask a question, or do I need to speak on it?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, good. Having said that, I would like to build on one point the gentleman said, which is, the planning board doesn't decide this, the select board doesn't decide this. What happens is the people, you all plus everyone else, will vote on the 6th of April. And so, whether you like it, or if you like it, you vote yes, if you don't like it, you vote no. But that is the great thing about a democracy.
You're scaring people though with failure to pass the planning
I
board.
didn't recognize you, sir, so
I-
I didn't recognize you, sir.
Yeah, well, I didn't recognize you.
I may rescind my comment about polite people. Go ahead, Evan.
Polite people is when the town of Durham tells me I can do
Sir, I
something,
am
and
not
$130,000 later, that's a problem that you're gonna hear from, trust me. And the planning board didn't implement this, the town planner did,
Sir,
and handed you a packet. Now, I'm a taxpayer, and I'm a voter in this town, and you didn't do this work, he did. And he handed it to you in a packet, and I watched it happen.
We appreciate your comments, but you're done for this time. Ms. Roy.
George, can I ask you some specifics about the things that you presented? Thanks. You talked about how the accessory apartment, the 50% thing, and there was a picture up there, and one of the, things was an accessory structure which was not attached. Yes, this. Does the 50% apply to the accessory apartment and to the accessory structure?
To each accessory apartment.
Okay,
So what's over the garage can only be 50% of the unit on the far right, and one's attached can be more than 50% of the same floor area. So each one of them can be no more than 50% based on the current rules.
okay. And so let's say someone put the accessory apartment that's part of the existing dwelling in. Now, does that become the totality of the square footage that could then be applied to the accessory apartment? Would that now be 50% of the
Larger-
totality? Yes.
no.
It's all,
Each
it's
of
from,
those-
it's
each
based
of
off
those
the
is
original.
approved as an accessory apartment.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, when someone's trying to do this, is this an application, or is this a permit that exists by code enforcement review? Or is this something that comes before the planning board?
It is purely a code enforcement officer review if it meets those limitations. Under the current ordinance, if it doesn't meet those limitations, let's just say it's because of the footprint of the garage or an existing addition, it comes out to be instead of 50%, it's 52%. They can go to the planning board and have that reviewed and get it approved if it doesn't meet it. So generally, the only permits that the code officer can issue must be no more than 50%.
Okay, and then if there, can you go to the next picture that has the house and the, right. Regardless of the additional acreage, but
Yep.
just the extra unattached dwellings.
Yep.
What does the driveway situation have to look like? Or when we're talking about that the standards apply, does each one of those get their own driveway, or does that entrance have one? Because this leads to the rural character type thing, right? Where like if that's a 2-acre lot with 300 feet of road frontage, are we now going to allow 2 driveways with 2 separate dwellings across that 300 feet? Or does this still have one driveway access that branches off to the existing dwellings?
There are no driveway limitations.
No driveway limitations, okay. Okay. And then, and maybe this isn't a question for you, maybe this isn't a question for the assessor, is how does this get taxed? Is that taxed as one property owner, and you want me to ask the assessor that question? I knew that's what you're gonna say.
No, I think the basic answer is that the assessor's gonna assess the property based on ownership. So if one person owns the whole thing, they're gonna get the tax bill for both units. If there's a condominiumizing of this where each of them own the individual unit and they own the land in common, then probably each of them are gonna get a tax bill. That's the basic, my basic understanding.
Okay, and just one other comment that I would like to make about this is that, it has been my experience that town employees are doing work that has been requested or directed for them to do. No one that works for the town, in my experience, is showing up presenting an agenda for our town. And so, I just think it's important for that to be recognized.
Thank you.
So I
And
hand
I appreciate your comment about the driveways. I don't think we ever discussed that in our meeting before, and that would be a hardship. You know, given this is an affordable housing issue, that would be a hardship for somebody that's trying to implement one of these options here. It's a good point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I speak because I'm not a resident?
you may speak.
I do have a question.
Please identify yourself.
I'm Alan Plummer, Code Enforcement Officer for Durham. And if the driveway would come into effect, I don't have my book in front of me, which I normally would like to read. But if there are 2 parcels on one driveway, would the subdivision minus the asphalt paving road come into play? Subdivision road.
This is just one parcel.
One parcel, but 2 houses on one driveway all requires a 911 address. So it would have to be named a private road. And if there are 2 houses on a driveway,
No, I think that this lot, which has the minimum of 300 feet of frontage, so if these amendments pass, you know, whether it's the variation that goes into effect if the town does not pass this, or if this passes, there's still gonna be a 300-foot road frontage. And that one lot will meet that 300 feet road frontage. And so if those 2 houses each have their own individual driveway, they're still gonna be just serving each one house.
but if there's one driveway for both houses, there are now 2 houses on one driveway,
Okay?
will it require a subdivision?
Wouldn't require a subdivision, it may require the approval of the private road if it's gonna be a common driveway. We'd have to look at that to see what the definitions are.
That's a good question.
But in any case, this is just saying this is one lot.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
Sir?
Oddball here. Get back to your condominiumizing. It's a lot of syllables. How would you parcel that out if you got 2 houses or 3 houses, but it's all contiguous land? So how is it split as far as taxation? Especially when somebody buys one house. So how are you gonna split that? Now you're gonna have 1 acre lots.
Which is what Ann was trying to suggest
No, there
with
wouldn't
this.
be, it doesn't need to be a split of that land, they can have, under just, it's called house-dominiums, but theoretically, legally, and I'm not a lawyer either, but my understanding is that they could each own the footprint, just like in a condominium association of the house, and they own the land in common. So there wouldn't be any, the only thing they'd be buying or selling would be the individual units and the joint rights of the land that serves them. just like a regular
So-
condominium
So who
association.
gets taxed for it?
Each of the owners would get taxed for their portion of it. And again, not the assessor either, but that's just my basic understanding.
But if one of them decides to sell one building, how are you gonna split that?
They wouldn't split it, they just like just like selling a condominium. You don't, it's the same thing, I think.
Is a condominium situation even legal in Durham? No.
It's governed by state law.
State regulates condominiums, the same as subdivision.
I'm sorry, anything else?
Yes, I've never seen one in Durham.
Mr. Roy?
Yeah, Joe Roy, Pinkenbrook Road, just follow up on Todd's question, because Todd, you're kind of getting at a question I had. So with this model, would that allow, let's say, a private entity to buy the lot and then build 3 houses and then sell the 3 houses to 3 separate owners, but the private entity is still retaining ownership of the lot?
Okay, now, under the law, it specifically says this does not exempt people from subdivision requirements. So if they were to create 3 units in a 5-year period, they would have to go to the planning board to meet all the subdivision requirements.
So, and I'm asking this just for my edification, not like I got your moment.
No, they're all good questions.
So, if I buy the lot and I build a house, and then I, for some reason, I don't envision doing this, but decide I want my in-laws to move in with me, so I build an apartment next to it, that's not gonna go through the condominium, house-dominium, whatever thing. But if I were to buy a lot and then immediately put 3 houses on it, and then sell Todd a house and sell Heather a house and sell the gentleman in the back corner a house, now that's kind of feeling a little bit like subdivision type behavior without dividing the lot, and this would say, no, you need to go through the planning board to get a because at that point you're trying to subdivide.
If they create 3 separate dwelling units, and I think that even includes the accessory apartments, they have to get a subdivision approval if they do all 3 within a 5-year period.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir?
Todd? Wouldn't it be easier to use a plan unit subdivision?
Say it again.
Doesn't our present subdivision with plan unit division, subdivision concept make more sense than this?
Just let me explain that Durham's basic planned unit development is simply a cluster development.
Yeah.
And so the ordinance allows you to go with each individual lot in a subdivision to have, instead of 2 acres and 300 feet of road frontage, if you set aside the land as open space, you can shrink those lots down to 1 acre and 150 feet of frontage. That's all in Durham's PUD / cluster subdivision approvals. That doesn't really deal with this. Whether it's better or not, that's another issue.
Couldn't you do? What's the minimum acreage for a plan unit development?
It would be 50% of the road frontage and lot area.
No, for.
1 acre, I mean, he's asking for.
For a whole plan unit development.
Yeah, plan,
Could you
not
take
plan
6?
unit,
Could you do it on 6 acres?
Yeah.
Theoretically, yeah.
So it would make more sense.
Again, this is what the law requires you to do. You can't require them to split these into separate lots.
Ms. Roy?
This is a follow-up about the cluster development. So we have multiple subdivisions in town where the lot sizes have been shrunk because of the open space.
Right.
Is this saying that on those lots, because they are less than 90,000 square feet, you could not do this?
Okay. First thing is there's another specific provision in the somewhat complicated law that says this does not abrogate the requirement or the limitations of private covenants. So if in all of these subdivisions that have been approved over the last 30 or 40 years, there is a statement in the covenants, single family only, this can't go in those subdivisions.
So, just
The wall that Heather, Philly Sharp, she's got a
So,
follow-up.
so can we take that same question out of the subdivision? I live on a 1 acre lot, I have no interest in doing this, I'm just saying for an example. I live on a 1 acre lot, not in a subdivision. I don't have 2 acres, would I not be able to do this? Because I don't have any covenants, right, I own my lot, my house is on it.
You could still do left side option, but you're close.
I could?
I think you could do the accessory apartments
With 1 acre.
with 1 acre, if it's grandfathered. It's been there since 1976.
78. Oh, mine.
76, no? Yeah, so if it's grandfathered, then it's a non-conforming lot. The state law also says that the towns can make their own decisions on how they're gonna treat non-conforming lots. But barring any express limitation on it, then I think you'd be able to do the accessory apartments on, 1 acre lot.
But I would still have to be able to meet the septic and those
Yeah,
the well
absolutely.
that type of thing, okay.
Mr. Roy?
I was just gonna ask a question, like in the current subdivision system, I think George might have answered it. If we already have a subdivision, 12 1 acre lots, those 1 acre lots are now going to be able to all add an accessory dwelling and turn it into a 26 acre.
Well, currently
26
they
unit
can,
subdivision.
if it's not restricted by the, homeowners covenants.
Mhm.
However, there's also, when you talk to 2 different lawyers, you might get 2 different answers of whether or not,
Pretty standard.
yeah, but particularly on these types of complicated issues, if there is a 10 lot subdivision, are those individual lots entitled to putting in an accessory apartment without going back to the planning board for an amended subdivision approval? And why that is important is because they approve a subdivision with 12 single-family homes, a certain number of driveways, they do a traffic review to see how much is it safe. And so, some lawyers would argue that no, any change in that subdivision has to go back to the planning board. Other lawyers would argue anything that's permissible under the zoning on that lot, they can do without going back to the planning board. And the law, I don't think is really clear on that question of what triggers a subdivision re-review.
So an example, what would that, if you don't mind me following up more, with an example with that, if you have a 13 unit, or 13 housing unit subdivision, and then all of a sudden, something like this passes and people do wanna put the accessory, how does that functionally look for the town of Durham? Where does the rubber meet the road on that? Does that come to the planning board, or they file for a building permit and Alan goes, you gotta go talk to the planning board on this, like,
I don't know. I gotta find
I'm just
out.
curious, like, at what point does it get to someone has to make a decision?
Ultimately, whoever's issuing the permit has to make the first decision. And then it may or may not go to the Board of Appeals or to the planning board.
I have the authority to issue a permit or deny a permit. Most likely, on that question, I would get legal assistance.
Ms. Roy?
Are there provisions where, I'm all about the buffering, right? Like, I have no problem with what happens as long as it, meets the requirements, and I feel like the most steadfast way for us to preserve our rural character is through buffering. And so, does the law include any type of provision to be able to put those types of requirements on this, so that if the town voted for more density, it could also require buffering around that?
My reading of the law is that anything that you apply to a single-family home, all single-family homes, you can apply to this. You cannot apply something that restricts it different than what you apply to the single-family dwelling.
Could
So if you require buffering of all single-family dwellings, you could require it on this. But I don't think you could just say, these all have to be buffered.
We do have that though, right, in our, we do I mean, I feel like unless you go before the planning board, those are things that are addressed at the planning board, like for site reviews and stuff, but I think if you.
Only in subdivision site plan review.
So in all of the things, all of the sections of the, like the noise, the lights, you know, that type of stuff, that's in the regular ordinance, not just applying to subdivisions. There's no buffering requirement there, other than meeting setbacks.
Correct.
Okay. And so we can't apply any type of buffering to this unless it already exists to what is existing.
Again, the law doesn't specifically refer to buffering, but it talks to spatial standards. So if you were to say this has to have a 50-foot buffer along the property line, that's having a standard, it's measurable, spatial standard that doesn't apply to a standard single family, they would say you can't do that.
Thank you, thank you.
Sir?
Kevin Carnes, Pekin Brook Road. I have just a couple of questions. I want to make sure I heard right. Where currently, and I guess it doesn't matter what was, I guess what matters is what is. And is it correct that this town requires 300 feet of frontage for any structure to be built on? Is that true?
That is the minimum lot frontage for every lot.
It is. So if you've got a lot that's 180 feet up against the road, goes back 220 feet, and then widens out to 900 feet, that's not a buildable lot?
Unless it's grandfathered. So if it existed in that configuration since 1976, then it would be a grandfathered lot, and he would issue a building permit for one house on that lot and for the new configuration that's required by law.
Okay, so now let's throw a mix into this, which I think you're gonna help me understand. Where does commercial building come into play? If one of these out structures, somebody buys it, builds it, whatever, and decides to put in a Ford factory,
Or a machine shop.
anything, commercial,
Any non-residential use has to go to the planning board for a conditional use approval.
okay?
I thought I saw a hand. Sir, you have not spoken. Do you have a question?
Maybe so are you.
I don't have any questions, no, I'm just here to learn.
Okay. I didn't want to miss you.
No, I'm good.
Mr. Booth.
If Mr. Carnes has a 180-foot frontage, he could build his own road and make his own frontage, correct?
That is correct.
So divide the lot down the middle to where it gets wide, and now I have road frontage.
So
even
any
though
new
it's a
lot
driveway?
any new lot that you create, including the split of an existing one, would have to create 300 feet of road frontage. And as Todd is pointing out, you could get approval of a private road and create new road frontage for that backland.
And that road would need to be built according to state specs, I guess, right?
Town
Town
specs.
Town specs, okay, yeah.
Okay. If you have a particular lot, I would strongly encourage you to meet with either Mr. Labarge or the code enforcement and say, this is my lot, this is what I'd like to do, so how can I make that work?
Right now, I don't wanna do it, I'm just thinking, never say never, right?
Never say, there's another generation coming.
Don't just have a conversation with them, get it in writing,
Well,
because I've had conversations with them. My question is, can I build a duplex with a detached accessory dwelling unit on a 3-acre lot?
Currently, no.
So why did you tell me I couldn't?
I'd like to have that conversation with you privately.
I don't.
We will. If you wanna have it, you'll have it privately.
Well, that's already on public, so when this goes on YouTube, it
I
was
appreciate
told to
your
me
comments.
in a conference
If you're
room.
here just to be argumentative,
No, I'm here
Well,
because the town of Durham screwed me over.
that's being argumentative.
Whatever
This rule.
whatever you dictate is argumentative, I guess. These gentlemen, this gentleman and this kind lady who sits on our select board can follow up with multiple questions. I haven't used any profanity. I'm very passionate about where
You're
I'm
making
sitting right now.
statements. Right now, it's.
I'm making factual statements, and if you're calling my integrity in
I'm
question,
saying, what I said was, you can have that
you keep
discussion.
interrupting me simply because I'm more passionate than these other individuals who are being very kind. I'm very passionate about where I sit today. I haven't been rude, and you keep cutting me off and not allowing me my time. because you know like what I'm saying.
I will address comments and questions, but if you wanna have, I said,
I'm
that
having
discussion
comments and
you will
questions.
have offline with Mr. Thabarge and or the co.
Fine, then I would love to ask another planning board member who, again, apparently I'm being told was involved in this proposal. And my point is being proven. All of these questions are being directed to the town employee. I'd like to hear from our elected officials. I'd like to hear more from our town, planning board. That's all I'd like to hear from.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
I'm so distracted right now, I can't remember what I was gonna ask.
Does anybody else have a question?
I remember right
There
now,
you go.
sorry. When these things are being considered, this kind of goes back to the buffering thing, right? And this is part of the overall impact of like how this is going to impact our municipal services. This is preemptive, like for everybody else to be thinking about, but in the position that I sit on the select board, this is a conversation that we're having, and that's around solid waste. Oh, yeah, Alan, I think you actually made this comment, that if we go with the future of what our solid waste contract looks like, every trash receptacle has to be 3 feet apart.
Right.
And so, when this is coming together, are those things being considered? Because that is a municipal impact, because now this could potentially have 6 trash cans that all have to be 3 feet apart at the roadside. And if it's not a road, a private road, then that's something that the trash gets picked up the way it does now. Which I'm not saying we shouldn't do, I'm just saying those are implications that are coming, and is there forethought and planning, is that conversation taking place around this as well?
Yeah, I think Alan, you brought it up at one of the last meetings, it's a whole other issue.
Certainly one of my concerns whenever we do future subdivisions, Casella, which is our existing hauler for recycling and waste, had presented to the select board that they're going to go to a more mechanized system, and they're looking at providing 2 64-gallon containers to each household. And those would have to be spaced 3 feet apart. The reason those have to be spaced 3 feet apart because there's an arm that comes and grabs that container and it just dumps it in to the appropriate bin within that unit. And this is to eliminate the workman's comp issues that Casella has with people having to, guys on the back of the truck lugging things in. So certainly one of my concerns is, especially, it's really more of with a subdivision where is Casella gonna be able to go into subdivisions or not? I mean, that's considered a private road. I don't know whether that is something that will be addressed. I think it certainly will be. Because if you have close to my house, it's just an example, there are 12 at the end of a dead-end road. Fortunate, it's at a dead-end road. There are 12 houses in there. You're going to have 24 containers. They're gonna have to be 3 feet apart. And they're gonna be lined up. So where is it more advantageous, safety-wise, to have them picking up at each individual household? I certainly think that if it's on a main drag, if it's on 136 or yes. Because we have another subdivision down here that says 6 houses, and it's really a big safety concern, but it's one of these things that we have to look at and be proactive about it and not reactive about it. It's gonna be a safety issue.
And I think, to your point, is that we need to look at it for subdivisions, we need to consider it for this. We're in great luck in that Ms. Keppinger is on the solid waste committee, and I'm sure she will bring that up going forward.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Any other questions?
So that's 96 feet for those 12. If you consider 3 feet on that side, 3 feet on that side, the container is 2 feet, 8 feet total.
I think we're wandering off the discussion.
It's a big distance.
No offense.
It's not to think about.
We have gone down a rabbit hole. Okay, any other questions about the housing?
I just have a clarification question. So with these 2 images here of Joe Roy, Lincoln Brook Road, I might have misheard earlier, I thought that someone said something about existing lot versus new lot. Could someone explain that a little bit more? So this is what you can do on an existing lot, but if, you can't do that if you buy a new lot and
A
start
vacant
working on a new lot, vacant lot, okay.
Can you show them the-
So the example on the left.
No, this would be either a newly created lot or an existing lot,
The image on the left or on the right?
both of them.
Okay.
So if someone has a 6-acre lot that's vacant right now, then they would be able to do that development.
But if you have a 2-acre lot, whether it's
You'd be
vacant or
limited
not,
to the accessory apartments.
and
Yeah,
so
whether
if
it's
your
vacant.
goal is to build a house with an accessory apartment,
Mhm.
currently, on a vacant lot, you have to build the house and then separately add the accessory apartment. You can't just say, I built this 3,000 square foot house and it's 1,500 square foot units.
If you had 2.5 acres, you could build the 2 1,500-foot units. You need 2.5 acres to do a duplex or a two-family.
You're referring to the accessory apartment, so if you had a house, you wanna build a house and you want the second floor to be an accessory apartment, is that what you're,
Yeah.
or?
I'm trying to understand what the options are for someone who has a 2-acre lot and is looking to build more than one unit, and what that process looks like.
So if that is a vacant lot, then they can build a single family and 2 accessory apartments. If it's got a house on it, they can add 2 accessory apartments, total of 3 maximum. And if those units are not less than 50% or less of the floor area of the main dwelling, then they have to add 2 acres for that unit.
And so where I get a little confused is, it's a vacant lot, I build a 2,000 square foot house, but with the intent of building an accessory dwelling. So then after I build my house, say, now I wanna build a 1,000 square foot accessory dwelling. Or right off the get-go, can I say I built a 3,000 square foot structure and 1,000 square feet of it is an accessory dwelling and 2,000 square feet of it is a main?
I don't think it makes any difference.
Okay. So I'm trying to just figure out what the difference between a duplex is versus a house with an accessory dwelling.
It's the size,
Okay.
that's the difference.
And so it just can't be split down the middle.
Right.
Ms. Roy was ahead of you.
I'm trying to understand when we go to town meeting. Are you suggesting that we're gonna choose between one of these to go with one article, or are both of these gonna be an option? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
They're together,
They're to,
it's like a package. This is one, there's no option.
okay,
This is,
The option is yes or no.
yes,
Yes
exactly.
or no?
okay, in one collective thing, and then if it's no, then the result would be what's on the bottom of the paper. Okay, thank you. Yes, got it, thank you.
Mr. Booth?
Is there no possible way in Durham to build, for say, a 6-plex, a 4-plex or a 6-plex? If you have well and septic enough, is there no provision? And why isn't there a provision?
Isn't there already that scenario down on, 125, close to the Freeport line?
But that was built wrong.
Grandfather. Cannot.
Under the current, land use ordinance, no, but if there was a interest in changing the land use ordinance, that is something that could be brought up. What we're addressing now is the implementation of this,
Well, it would fully address what the state wants us to
at this point.
fully address.
Okay. Moving on to anyone else have any questions?
John, one thing I would like to state, one thing the planning board does, when something is new, comes to us, we don't arbitrarily decide as a planning board, well, this is our opinion, and we stop there. We have to try to get the public involved as much as we possibly can. And one of the best ways that we thought we could was through a survey. You know, surveys are, what do you do with them? Well, it tries to give us some guidance. And we're using that survey along with the comprehensive plan, because comprehensive plan is not the ordinance, that is our guide. The ordinance is the only thing that we can really enforce. So we're trying to do the best we can, and that's what we did with this. We took that survey and we came up with this. We had many discussions on this, believe me. I could certainly go back and review this and tell you exactly when this was on the agenda. And I know a lot of this scenario was printed out like this and it was presented to the planning board. And we've had, let me say, we've been talking about this for over a year. So I don't want people to feel that we go in this willy-nilly and we just come up with these arbitrary ideas. We do not do that. We try to get the public involved as much as possible. That's why we're having these public meetings. And one of the unfortunate things is, granted, I know there are, 3,800 voters in this town, but 150 people come to town meeting. And some people get pissed off, I'll use the word, about why did they vote that in? But they never go to town meeting and vote on different things. So it's all about getting involved. And I would certainly encourage anybody, if you're frustrated with certain things that are going on in town, get involved in a committee. You can learn a lot, an awful lot from that. And you can learn a lot more than sometimes what you think you may know, that's why I've been involved for many years.
Oh, sure.
I'd like to just respond to Alan a little bit. Can you refresh my memory, when you sent the survey out, how did you send it out and to how many?
The thing about sending a survey out, it's how do you present that to townspeople? And I know we have it on the town website, but not everybody has that. And I don't recall if we sent out.
I will take a shot at that. There were a couple of ways we did it, not with, as Alan said, it was on the town website, mentioned many times, see the survey. We brought it up at our meetings. We also posted it, the survey itself, on the Get and Go door, because that's where a lot of people go to Durham. So it was posted there, it was posted at the town hall, and I stood at the November 22 election for 8 hours at a little table there, answering questions and trying to get people to come over and see me, but I think they thought I was selling something.
Okay, and just, Alan, just as a footnote to your comment, it's been my experience, I've been in Durham for about 46 years, and everything's fine with everybody, it seems, unless it's in their backyard. Then all of a sudden it makes a difference. And, and I know that for a fact. So, one of the things that I don't think you wanna feel too bad about is when people don't show, it's like not voting in a presidential election, you live with the results. And it's unfortunate that we don't have 1,500 show up at town meeting, but it's been like that for many a year. So, hang tough.
Sir?
Yes, I just want to follow up on Alan. You said that you used a comprehensive plan. Can we go back to the slide where the comprehensive plan tried to get duplexes on a 2-acre lot? The comprehensive plan actually suggested to go in the opposite direction of getting a duplex on a 2-acre lot. The only reason sorry for the,
No, that's all right.
the only reason I'm asking you to go back is to make sure that I didn't read that
No.
incorrectly.
That's what's good. That's what it says.
And so if we're following the comprehensive plan, we shouldn't be adding acreages to duplexes, we should be going back down to the 2-acre lots,
George, it just worked a second
which is opposite of what we're proposing tonight.
I will take that one, just to show you that we do something.
I don't doubt, I never said you don't do anything. I never said that.
As George said earlier, a comprehensive guide is a plan, and there are contradictions, for lack of a better term. The comprehensive plan talks about increasing housing availability. It talks about maintaining the rural character, and there's some other things that apply in that. And so what we tried to do is we did this, and with the survey, you'll see that the survey, the majority, 57% said we want to maintain the rural character, i.e. have more or less density, bigger lots. And so I think that was where some of that discussion came. But, so I guess that's my point, is there's a contradiction in that particular area.
It's- If I may just follow up.
You may follow?
I have it politely. What is the legal ramifications of this guide? Is this a guide that, say, some of us that show up use, or is there a legal, what am I trying to say, a binding agreement that says that why have it if we don't follow it? Why, who is it for and what does it do? Is it simply a guide that we can throw out whenever we want? Or is it a guide that we're legally bound to kind of follow when it says amend the land use ordinance to allow duplexes on standard 2-acre lot?
It is a guide, so it's not a legal requirement for your specific question.
Thank you.
I saw a hand.
I was gonna answer that question, cause you know how
Would
much
you like, you may do a better job than I do.
I very much stand on, the comprehensive plan was a voter-approved plan, and as we make ordinance changes, they are supposed to be in line with the comprehensive plan as its guide.
And so would this be, sorry, I'm speaking online.
You may speak. Are you finished?
I had something else before that, but I
Well,
forgot what it was.
He'll buy you time. to-
Because I interrupted you, I
It's
apologize.
okay, I'll write it down as I think of
I just
things.
wanna know are we now, if that's a voter enacted thing, are we going against 3.1 that says amend the land use ordinance to allow duplexes on a standard 2-acre lot? We're now increasing the lot size. We're going against the comprehensive plan as I read it.
But you're stopping at, unless there is an objective basis for requiring a larger
Can you
lot.
please explain the objective basis to me so I can?
The objective basis from the position that I sit in is what I said before, in looking at the municipality and the impacts as a whole. The increased density of the housing isn't just going to affect the lot itself. It brings with it impacts to the municipality as a whole. That requires, and we can look at data to show that as our population has grown, our town government has grown, our school has grown, our need for municipal services has grown. And our town solely relies on the taxpayer to fund all of these things. We don't have any business infrastructure that contributes to our tax base. So you can't just stop at the sentence right there where the impact simply talks about the land itself or the density itself. That can't just be taken out of context. There is an entire impact that happens regarding this.
In taxes though, aren't the taxes going to increase as the structures get put on each lot? The assessor's gonna clearly increase the tax on that homeowner who now has 3 standalone structures. The taxes are gonna go up, you're gonna make more money.
That is an argument.
It hasn't worked that way.
And what I
Well,
would
that's a whole
say,
different, that's
being,
RSC
it is,
five.
that is a whole other argument, and being a devil's advocate for that, is that how many of, I remember our principal at DCS getting up at the budget meeting, not the town budget meeting, at the school budget meeting, and saying that it seemed like in whatever year it was, every house sold came with a first grader. And it was a joke when he said it, but the implication with more housing is all of the additional kids and all the additional teachers that have to get hired, and not one tax bill, not even the highest tax bill in Durham for a residence, pays for the cost to educate a child for the year. And so, I'm just asking that when you're making your arguments, you're also considering the other impacts that are involved.
And I like to say, I think that's what we did, but any other questions? You sure? Any other questions? If not, I'm gonna turn it over to the planning board and get their comments. So, Juliet, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think that, I would like to take this back and discuss a little further, with the board, the duplex question, honestly. 2.5 acres, or actually 3 versus 2. So I've heard a lot of good things here, I'd like to take that and talk a little bit.
Well, that's one of the reasons we have public meetings like this. It always brings certainly something to our attention that we may not have already had in discussion, which is a good thing. It's all about the communication. The lack of communication does nothing. So, as Juliet said, it's something that we will continue to have more discussion and we may refine this even more. I mean, some of the questions about driveways, and if they're brought up now, it's better to resolve them now versus, oh, what if? So, there will be further discussion by the planning board, that's for sure.
Anything else?
No, I said my other pieces.
That communication is always the hardest part. This is why we do this. We try to plan so that we can get public input and react to it and refine things before the April town meeting. So thank you all for being here today and all of your comments, and we'll certainly take them into consideration and we'll deliberate it further in the future.
Tyler?
I think even here in this small subsection, we sort of had an echo of our also small survey subsection. Like, I would never contradict that is true. Like, you never get as much input as you want. I personally also think we should have full flexibility, and my response to that would be would consider not voting for our own plan, but this is just a plan that we've come up with over 18 months that seems to reflect most of the people, and however it ends up coming out in the end, I think is again going to be governed by some 10%, 5% of the population. And clearly there's some people who feel strongly in one direction towards opening it up to the bare minimums, where we can put as many units as the state would legally allow, and some that want to maintain as much of the rural character as possible. So I encourage anyone who feels strongly either way to go talk to your friends and get them to come out and vote, your neighbors, because if we get full participation and whichever way the chips fall, that would be awesome.
Anything else? George, did you, any closing thoughts? Well, I probably have spoken enough, so I will close with that. And with the last thing is, this is not the last. We'll work on it as a planning board. You're welcome to, if you think of questions after this or whatever, send them to George. You'll see future meetings, public hearings, and so on forth down the road. So please reach out. And the key is how.
I guess I do it when you're
Jesus,
done.
go ahead.
I know, right?
Please do.
Well, I came here as a builder, and I'm not looking for any work, I can promise you that, I say no 3 times a day. I just think that the conversation of affordable housing is a farce in this day and age. The codes that we have to abide by are such that it's impossible to build affordable. And with this, whatever solution from the state coming down was, in some people's eyes, a glimmer of hope for maybe we can be a little bit affordable. But then you throw the restriction on the lot size, is kind of a kickback to, we kind of want this, but we kind of don't, which I get both sides. I don't know, I get frustrated with the whole piece of affordable housing, because there is no such thing. So, that's my 2 cents.
Oh, yeah, please identify.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adam Daly, I live on Old Doe Road.
Okay. Did you want to mention your company and phone?
No, I do not, because I'm gonna say no.
Thank you. I was gonna feel bad if you left without saying.
Yeah, please don't call. 2025.
You opened Pandora's box. I miss Roy.
I just wanted, I did think of a question, but I can wait, it doesn't,
No, let's kill it now.
okay. So, when the article or the ordinance, is this an ordinance? Is this, yes,
It will be in the form of ordinance amendments.
okay. And so my question would be is, if we're putting specific language in that says the square footage required, but then we do some reconfiguration of what we allow for a lot size in the future, how would that then, do you see what I'm saying? So like, should it read the buildable lot, like what we have as a standard for a buildable lot? Because what if 3 years down the road, we change that? How, you know what I'm saying? Should it be like more general and say the requirement for a buildable lot versus an actual number that's there in case that number changes?
No, it can't be changed without going to town meeting.
Right, but if we went to town meeting and we passed the size of a buildable lot to 1 acre or 1.5 acres versus the 2 acres, and we changed the amount of road frontage needed, is this language gonna be general to what the current buildable lot is, or would we then have to go back and change both of these things? Is my question making sense?
I think it does,
Okay.
what you're saying is, say buildable lot size versus 6 acres or 2 acres or whatever it may be. Is that,
Well, it says area per, the minimum lot size currently is 90,000 square feet, that will stay. And then it's gonna add a provision for minimum buildable, or minimum area per dwelling unit. So, basically, minimum lot size is 90,000 square feet, and then they'll have to, if they're putting in accessory apartments, they won't have to get any larger lot. If they're gonna be putting in a full-size dwelling unit, in addition to the single family, then they'll have to add 2 acres. If they go with 3, they'll have to have 6 acres. So it's not gonna say minimum lot size 6 acres, it's gonna say 90,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
and if you change that to 180,000, then this is one of those where you have to go find this, it would be more than one place that you're gonna have to go and change.
That's what I was asking.
You're gonna have to come into this article or section, I guess it is, of the land use ordinance and change it from 90 to whatever, the new ordinance is.
I see. Thank you.
I know, I'm a little late to start.
Did you just wake up, or?
Yeah,
I'm
it's been a long day.
I didn't mean to be wise.
No, that's fine, I like it. Used to, that's how I roll. Anyway, there wasn't much topic on the driveway, which, I talked about the driveway, which I was questioning too. So the 300 feet restriction hit on a little bit, but then it was kind of like, it wasn't talked about, is that right? You guys didn't have really a plan for that, is that?
I think we need to go back and look at the driveway question
Yeah.
specifically.
Okay.
Does
So it would
that
have to be, whether it would be a separate or a branch off type of thing. And then on the town proposed plan for the, say, garage apartment above, that's to be 50% of the house you would be taxed. Say your house is 2,000 square feet, the apartment over the garage can be 1,000,
Yes.
and the garage space doesn't count.
Correct.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
You're done.
Maybe.
Anybody else? Go ahead. There's no Cubs game on tonight, so I.
Yeah, I know, we got a little extra time for me, John. So, I'm trying to phrase this as a question or statement, just kind of get a thought out there. In the scenarios we have here in front of us, the 4, this bottom left one, the vacant one of what the state would require, is there a mechanism for the planning board or anyone in town, or planning board to consider saying, maybe we're fine with a 2-acre lot having duplexes, but not adding the 3rd unit, and then taking a larger lot approach for the 3rd, like, saying, our option is bottom left and top right, rather than
And
top
Joe,
to, like, I'm just
exactly
asking
what
that,
I
you
was
know?
thinking.
No, and I'm not making a suggestion,
I'm
I don't wanna
No, like
make that.
things like
I'm
that, that I
I'm
think we
curious
should.
if that's even allowed.
2 acres.
Well, just to remind everybody, we were there
We were,
earlier
yeah,
this year,
we were.
and the concern was too complicated.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
we
I
went in
understand
this
that.
direction, you can certainly go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've
But I
gone
was
through
thinking-
so many iterations.
Yeah, no, and that's where I'm just asking, cause I've seen several iterations at different meetings, so I'm trying to organize them in my head, and I didn't save the sheet from the last meeting, so
No,
I can't exactly remember what it was.
That's a good point. Juliet, I think you said that's one of her.
That's
questions.
what I was thinking when I mentioned that, the duplex.
And then it turns into the conversation of attached versus detached, and it was the 3 completely detached units, which was what Todd was saying, that then just becomes 3 separate lots. And that, yeah, I remember all of that. That was a very lengthy conversation.
Yeah, it's scratching it back in my head now.
Okay, anybody else? I'm looking at you. You're good? Anybody else? Please. Oh,
I'm familiar with thankless jobs, and I just wanna say to the volunteers on the planning board, thank you for your work.
For sure.
so they pay us the big bucks. Good. Anybody else want to praise us? If not, any other questions? And if you do have specific questions or want to follow up, as I asked you to, please do that after we adjourn. With that, I need a motion.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? If not, raise your hand. If you say yes, we'll have you.